two things that I want to start with this morning. Two facts. The first one is this, and some of you have been around for a while, you've heard me talk about this before, but it's an important fact, is that everyone is living for and searching for happiness. It's a fact. Everyone is. It's a driving force. I've never met, and maybe you have, but I've never met anyone who says, you know what I really hope today? What I'd really like to get out of today is unhappiness. I would just really like to just be unhappy all day today. If that could happen, that would be the best day ever. No one ever says that. We all want happiness. In fact, one of my favorite quotes comes from a theologian, philosopher. His name's Blaise Pascal, and he says this. He says, all men seek happiness. Fact. This is without exception. Whatever different means they employ, they all tend to this end. The cause of some going to war and others avoiding it is the same desire in both, attended with different views. In other words, he's saying, listen, you may choose it differently. You may pursue it differently, but every decision that you make, there is a driving force behind it in which you're looking for happiness. The reason some people get married and some people don't get married. Same reason. The reason some people choose to become a police officer, like my father, some people become a pastor. Same reason. The reason some people go to church and the reason that other people skip. The reason that you spend your money the way that you do. The reason that you buy the things that you do. The reason that you invest in the way that you do. The reason that is driving you behind the scenes, underneath, is that every single person is pursuing happiness. It's a fact. But here's the second fact. Only 1 in 3 Americans would actually say that they're happy. Everybody's looking for it. 2/3 are unhappy, right? And if you want just a physical representation, if I could have everybody in this section, would you just stand up for just a moment? Just stand up for a moment, I know. Everybody look over here. Be jealous because these are the people that are unhappy, and look over there, those are the people, they're all unhappy, right? 2/3. Go ahead, you guys, thank you. You can sit back down. 2/3, 1 out of every 3 says, yeah, I've got it, I'm happy. There they are. They're so happy. Congratulations on all of that. And then here's all of you. Too bad. All unhappy. Why? Here's the reason why. Because you're answering the question wrong. Everybody's answering the question. Nobody is, whether you've thought about it or not, you're answering the question with your life. And if you're unhappy, it's not because you're not pursuing, it's that because your answer to that question isn't hitting the mark. There is some disconnect between your answer and reality, which means what you've got to do is you've got to change your answer. You've got to find the right answer to the question, okay, so how do you find happiness? Now, I found out this morning that I'm not a millennial and I'm not a Gen Xer, I'm a Zennial. It's just that I'm a Zennial. I was born, but I won't even tell you what that means or what that means about my age. But as a Zennial, I tried to do what millennials do. So if you don't know the answer to something, what do? First thing I did was ask Siri. I said, Siri, tell me, how do you find happiness? And Siri responded and said, that's confidential. Very helpful. So then I did the next thing. I Googled it. Right, which, that's what you do. And if something isn't working now, I just Google it. We're in the process of doing some repairs on our house, and so I've used Google quite a few times. Okay, how do I fix this? And so I Googled it, and when I Googled it, there were the first top 3 things that came up. First thing that came up was the Observer. Here's how to be happy. And it gave you a list of things that you should do. If you want to be happy, here's what you do, right? Letting go of the desire for specific outcomes. Don't try to actually achieve don't shoot for an outcome, just let it happen, whatever, This is their opinion. Set your own standard for success, don't let other people define that. Give 100% to the things that make you happy. Don't do anything that makes you unhappy, just give 100% to the things that make you happy, okay? There are a whole bunch of others, but I won't go into those. Psychology Today was the next one. And they suggested a number of things, and one of the things they suggested was positive thinking. They said, okay, so here's what you do. If you're unhappy, close your eyes, don't do this. I'm just telling you what they said. They said, close your eyes and imagine that person who you really love. And now imagine them smiling at you. Now slowly open your eyes. As you slowly open your eyes, are you smiling? There you go. That's how you can find happiness. Right? I'm just telling you what they said. Tony Robbins says that the secret to secret to happiness is progress. If you're just progressing, you just have to make progress. And as long as you're making progress, then you'll be happy. Lots of opinions out there. Lots of ideas. This morning, what we're doing is we're starting a brand new series where we're studying through Psalm 119. The longest chapter in the Bible. In fact, it's longer than certain books of the Bible. 176 verses long. And those 176 verses are split into 22 sections. And each one of those sections is built around a letter of the Hebrew alphabet, right? So consecutive, it's like ABCs. And each of those sections is split into 8 stanzas. And you'll see it this morning as we're going to study through the first two, Aleph and Beth. They're the first 2 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, like our ABCs. And each stanza, each of the 8 stanzas starts with that particular letter. And so it's designed to be memorable, which is really neat. Because here's what that means. This is God's word, and that means God is speaking to us in a way that's meant to connect. He's meeting us where we are, and He's giving us tools and resources that we can actually take and we can remember, and we can take it into our lives. 176 verses, 22 sections, 8 verses each, and there's one major theme that we're going to be focusing on. One major theme, multiple applications. I think it was Charles Spurgeon that said there's as many thoughts and ideas in here as the waves of the sea, and yet it's unified as the sea itself. And the focus is God's word. His law, His commands, His precepts. There's multiple ways that the writer David is actually describing God's word to us. And that's the heart of it, and that's the focus. And what David comes to us and he says, it's not, listen, if there's unhappiness, it's not because there isn't an answer to the question. It's not as if it's impossible for you to find happiness. There is an answer to the question, but the problem that we have with this answer is it goes against the grain. It goes against our normal way of thinking and our natural way of living. It goes against, it's countercultural. And therefore, there's very few people who go, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. It's going to challenge you. But here at the end of the day is what David says. See, happiness is directly tied to your relationship to and your attitude toward God's word. You have the wrong attitude, it's going to lead to unhappiness long term. The right attitude, the right relationship, David starts it right off, verse 1, and he says, this is the way. And the question that we have to ask is, are we willing to believe that? And believing it isn't just head knowledge, it's the application of it into our lives. And that's what we're going to look at this morning. So would you stand with me? We're going to look at the first 2 sections together this morning, the first 16 verses. Let me pray for us, and then we're going to read it together. All right? Father God, I thank you for your word. Lord, today as we begin this series, as we look at these first 2 sections of this amazing chapter, which is pointing us to the magnificence of your word. Lord, I pray that we wouldn't just be in awe of it, but that as you speak to us through it, because your word is living and active, as we'll talk about this morning, that God, as you speak to us through it, that you would do work in our hearts. Lord, that you would break down barriers that stand between us and you. Father, there's some people here this morning who, they're not walking with you. They've never really trusted you. They've never really gotten into that relationship. Father, I pray that today they would hear your voice. Some people here this morning who are hurting for all sorts of reasons. God, I know that there's people here who are hurting today. Father, I pray that you would speak comfort, but you would also call them forward. Because you don't want us to stay stuck or stagnant in those places. You want us always to be continuing to progress, to develop. I pray for those who have stagnated in their walk with you today, that are discouraged maybe, who've maybe given up hope, that today that they would find a piece of hope. For those who are apathetic, God, that you'd light a fire under us. That we'd not be content with the status quo. We'd not be content with just going through the motions. Lord, do work in our lives today. As many people in this room, or as many circumstances and situations, as many needs. And Father, I'm so thankful that you're the God who can meet and does meet every single one of them. So Lord, thank you for your word. And I pray, God, that you would you do that great work in our lives today. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, Psalm 119, verse 1. Blessed are those whose way is blameless, who walk in the law of the Lord. Blessed are those who keep his testimonies, who seek him with their whole heart, who also do no wrong but walk in his ways. You have commanded your precepts to be kept diligently. Oh, that my ways may be steadfast in keeping your statutes. Then I shall not be put to shame, having my eyes fixed on all your commandments. I will praise you with an upright heart when I learn your righteous rules. I will keep your statutes. Do not utterly forsake me. How can a young man keep his way pure? By guarding it according to your word. With my whole heart I seek you. Let me not wander from your commandments. I have stored up your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. Blessed are you, O Lord. Teach me your statutes. With my lips I declare all the rules of your mouth. In the ways of your testimonies I delight as much as in all riches. I will meditate on your precepts and fix my eyes on your ways. I will delight in your statutes. I will not forget your word. This is God's word. You can go ahead and be seated. All right, so if you've got a bulletin on your way in, there's 5 things that I want to walk through with you this morning. All right, David starts off this whole psalm with this one word, blessed. A lot of people talk about the desire to be blessed, but I think we often fail to really understand what that means, the idea of being blessed. Timothy Keller says this: to be blessed means complete wellness of being and profound fulfillment. Martin Lloyd-Jones puts it even easier in his message series on the Sermon on the Mount, which is all about blessed. Blessed is the one. Blessed is the one. He says, blessed, here's what it means: happy. Not a happiness that's controlled by my circumstances, but we often call it joy. But in the old language of happiness, it was not circumstantial. It was an inner sense of joy, an inner sense of happiness. And so what David says from the very beginning, he says, okay, so we're about to get into talking about God's word and focusing on it. So let me tell you this: blessed is the one, look at it, whose way is blameless, who does what? Who walks in the way of the Lord. That word walk is that idea of lifestyle, right? Walking. It's a simple pattern, one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. It's this just doing this one thing over and over and over and over. And so when David says the one who walks in the way of the Lord, he's talking about who lives a pattern of obedience to God's word. Blessed, happy is the one whose way is blameless, who walks in the way of the Lord. Here, let me just put it in another way for us as a church. Happy is the person for whom God's word is the filter. It's one of our core values, right? The word is the filter. And if you want to think about what that means, let's think about it in the negative for a moment. We live in the age of what people call fake news. Right? You go on any news outlet and somebody's calling something fake news. You go on any of the social media outlets and somebody's calling something fake news, right? And what they're saying is, this story isn't true. But let's think about this for a moment. When people are calling something fake news, what is the basis of that? For most people. Now, sometimes we'd say, oh, well, because somebody twisted a news story and it's not actually true. But here's what I see, at least on social media, is that for the most part, people call something fake news because they don't agree with it. Well, that's fake news. Why? Well, because I don't like it. Well, that doesn't mean it's fake. Well, yeah, it does. And a lot of times it's along party lines, right? So if I'm a Democrat and it's an article or somebody's saying something about someone who's in the Democratic position, right, in politics, and they're saying something negative about them, it's easy for people to go, fake news, fake news. Why? Well, because you're saying something against my political party. Or on the other side, Republicans, somebody's saying something against a Republican candidate or somebody, or the president. It's like, well, fake news. Why? Well, because I don't like it, because I don't agree with it, it must not be true. And when that's the case, and don't get me wrong, there is fake news out there. But what I'm saying is that the tendency is that we are evaluating on the basis of what we like and what we don't like, and it puts you in the judgment seat over everything. And really, it's putting your sense of feelings and your preferences in the seat of authority over everything else. Do I like it? Do I not? Do I agree with it or do I not? See, when it comes to God's word, that's not meant to be the relationship. When the Word is the filter, you don't sit in authority over God's Word. God's Word sits in authority over you. You don't come to God's Word and evaluate and say, well, do I agree with it or not? It's not about what you think about the Word, but rather what the Word thinks about you. It's not about you evaluating it, but it's about it evaluating you. It's about it coming to you. I mean, think about let me just read 2 verses to you. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, all Scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work. If this is breathed out by God, if this is the Creator, the eternal God over all things, if this is His word to you, and I know there's debate about this, and by the way, we'll kind of work our way through some serious questions as we go through this series about this book. But if this is God's word, what should be your relationship to it? Should you come to it as judge and critic, or should you come to it as it over you? Or how about Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, verse 18, he says, for truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Not a dot, not an iota. He says not even it's in the original, it's not even a curve of the letter will pass until earth and heaven pass away. In other words, he's saying, my word, which it also includes God's law, my word is solid. It's going to last through every age, through every generation, through every fad. In every culture, it applies. It is the same. It is unchanging. And if that's the case, then how should we be approaching this? Not as one who comes and says, here, let me pick and choose what I like. Or how about this? Let me pick and choose when I apply it. As long as it's convenient, I'll do it. Unless it's really making me uncomfortable, then forget it. The pieces that I don't like, I'll just say that must be a mistake. Somebody must have made an error when they were, the scribes. They must have made a mistake, or they put their own preferences in there because that doesn't line up with my preferences. Do you understand? If this is God's word, He will disagree with you. If He agrees with you all the time, then who's God? If you never allow God's word to disagree with you, you have a real problem. You have a wrong relationship with God's word. The call of response, David says, here's the way to blessedness, is the one who walks. Read verse 2. Blessed are those who keep His testimonies, who do no wrong, verse 3, but walk in His ways. In other words, the call, he's saying, here's the way, the secret is, it's obedience, but not just obedience. Look at the end of verse 2. He said, blessed are those who keep His testimonies, who seek Him with what? Underline it, their whole heart. Circle the word blessed and underline whole heart. You can underline that who seek Him with their whole heart. See, God is not just after your rote, mindless obedience. This isn't God coming and saying, listen, I've given you a checklist. Look at this. Do all of this. Just follow all the rules. He's not saying blessed is the one who keeps the list. He's saying blessed is the one who has that right attitude and relationship towards the word, in which they are submitting in a loving relationship where it's not just a duty, but it is a joy in the context of that relationship with God to say, my life, I want to serve you. It's not just that I have to, I want to do it. You see, a right attitude, he says, here's the way to happiness. You've got to have a right way of relating to God's word. And the only way to relate to God's word is not as the one who sits over it, who filters it through your life, but rather your life is filtered through it. Where the goal is finding out God's will. Here it is, God revealing what He wants us to do and saying, that's what I want to do. It's wholehearted. Wholehearted obedience. That's the first one there. The wholehearted obedience to God's commands. That's the secret. Number 2, not only should we have a sense in which we're coming to God's word as the guide, but there's also a sense that as we come to God's word, when we have a right relationship with us, it's also a reality check. It's a gut check on the places in our lives that are not lining up with God's commands. Look at how he continues in verse 4, he says, you've commanded your precepts to be kept diligently. Now, let me just ask you for a moment. would that describe the way that you are living your life? Right now. I'm not asking about the way that you want to live your life. But I'm asking you right now in your life, are you seeking to diligently? You know, that sense of diligence, it's that ongoing consistency of pressing in and pressing forward in seeking to keep God's commands. Is there a diligence to your life? He says that's God's command. He's commanded it to be kept diligently. But then look at verse 5. Oh, that my ways may be steadfast in keeping your statutes, then I shall not be put to shame. What's David saying? And by the way, that's who wrote this. It's David. What's he saying in that verse? Here's what he's saying. That ain't me. I mean, you don't have to say, oh, that my ways would be steadfast if your ways are already steadfast. You don't have to say, well, then I won't be put to shame if you're not being put to shame already. See, what David in this moment is doing is he's saying, okay, God, man, I come to your law and I'm supposed to be keeping it diligently. Blessed is that man, which begs the question, is anybody able to be happy? Because who among us measures up to that, whose way is blameless, who's keeping his commandments, who's following after, who's submitting and obeying in everything? He says, that's the way to happiness. I'm supposed to be keeping these diligently, and yet, oh, that my ways would line up with that. You see, when you come to God's word and you're approaching it in the right way, here's what it should be doing. Not only should it be showing you the way that you should be going, but it also should be showing you the distance between the way you should be going and the way that you're actually living. There's a sense in which when you come to the Word, when you are approaching it the right way, it's not just that you're reading it, but it's reading you. And if it's never convicting, if it's never challenging you, if it's never calling you out, then there is something wrong with the way that you're relating to it. Because when you come to God's Word, here's what God's going to do. In essence, God is going to come and He is going to put His finger on that thing. And if you don't know what that's like, if you don't know what that means, then you don't have a right relationship. And if you come to it and that isn't happening, then there's some sort of disconnect, because no one is there yet. I mean, think about this. I mean, look, if you're like Jesus, praise God, then you don't have to think about all of this, but none of us are. See, if you never get to the place where there is a soul cry within you, I'm telling you, there are times where my heart just breaks and I say, God, oh, that I would be there. I want to get there. I'm like the guy, I am that person that loves to get to the end of a process. I don't like to be on the journey. I want to get there. I want to be finished. See, everyone struggles. There in your notes, everyone struggles with the distance between longing and reality. Or maybe I should say it differently. Everyone should be struggling with it. Because there is a distance. And see, God's word functions. I mean, think about it. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12. For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing the division of soul and of spirit, of joints and of marrow, and discerning the thoughts and the intentions of the heart. See, God's word functions as a mirror. It's not a weapon. See, if you come to the Word and you're reading it and all you're hearing is what everybody else needs to do, you have a problem. You don't have a right relationship to the Word, because it's not a weapon to go, see you? Look at all your problems. Let me tell you what's wrong with you. Let me tell you why you don't have it all together, because that's the problem here. See, that's the way when you read the Word, if that's what you're primarily doing, you're missing it. Because it's not that way. It's a mirror that God is holding up to you. And by the way, He's not holding it up just so you can look at your behaviors. He's saying, look at your heart. And you know what what's happening in the heart? The thoughts, the inner thoughts that no one else can see. The motivations that are driving you that no one else has the ability to judge. Now, there's plenty of people who judge motivations. But they don't have the ability. Why? Because they can't see in your heart. But see, God sees in your heart, and He's trying to draw those things out, to put His finger in those places and going, take a look over here. Not in cruelty, but in love, because do you know what God is doing when He's putting His finger on those things? He's saying, do you know what? You understand what you're choosing? See, you're in this pursuit of happiness, which, by the way, you should be, because you were created for it. But what you're choosing, when you're choosing this rejection of my commands and you're going this direction, you're actually choosing unhappiness. God says, I don't want you to be unhappy. God is not the killjoy in the sky who wants everybody walking around with a frown on their face. Man, if he wanted that, he would never send his son to save you. To give you an eternity where we're told Psalm 16:11 is joy, a place of joy unspeakable and pleasures forevermore. I mean, God could have said, forget it. I really want you unhappy. Let me give you hell. Why would he send his son if not to rescue you and save you into his joy? And so when he's challenging you, when he's convicting you, he's saying, I want joy and nothing less in your life. And you're not choosing it. And so let me ask you to just for a moment before we go on, let's take this and apply it. Where's God putting his finger on in your life right now? Right now. Where are you crying out, God, oh, that my ways would be in line with yours? And if you're not, you're missing it. Number 3, here's where it should lead as well. When you have a right relationship, it leads to a place of prayer, which really is a place of dependence, right? Recognizing our failure to measure up should lead us to a place of dependence. Right? That verse 5, what is he really doing in the middle? This is a prayer. He's having a conversation with God. And it's easy to sometimes miss that as you're reading through, but that's really what's happening. And in verse 5, he's praying. He's looking at this reality. He sees the longing. He says, that's really where I should be going. And I'm seeing a disconnect, and I really want to be there. And then at the same time, what is he doing? He's on his knees, and he's praying. And look at it. Look at verse 5 and circle the word steadfast. He says, oh, that my ways may be steadfast. Circle that word. Because here's the mistake that you might make if you read that. You might think that David is saying, oh, that my ways would be rock solid and I would be able to really do everything that I'm supposed to do and I would have the strength to do it on my own. I really want to be steadfast. That's not what he's saying in this moment. Do you know the word steadfast there? It's the same word. If you go just a few verses later, in verse 90, it's the same word for established. And I want to read this to you. This one verse, verse 90 says, your faithfulness endures to all generations. You have established the earth and it stands fast. When he prays in this moment, he says, oh, that my ways would be steadfast, or it could say, oh, that my ways would be established. He's saying, God, I can't do this. Oh, that you would do your work of creation within me, because I don't have it. I can't do this on my own. I can't make myself change. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. I mean, think about this. Do you think at this point in his life, and by the way, David is older. This is not David writing as a young man. He's writing looking back, and he's still as an older man looking back and saying, oh, that my ways would be established by you. Bend my will, because I am not bending it. I'm not strong enough to do the work that needs to be done in my own heart. God, I need you to change me. You see, when you read the Word, God's going to convict you and He's going to challenge you. I think it's part of the reason some people don't read the Word. Because it's painful. It is. It's painful. You can't go to the Word and not say, yeah, there's some pain in it. Because God's putting His finger in some painful places in your life, and so it's uncomfortable. But the place that ought to leave is to our knees, where we get down on our knees and we say, God, I can't do it. I need you. It's what Paul points out in Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you both to will and to do for His good pleasure. He says, God is at work within you. And it's not something that we're supposed to just assume and just go, well, God's at work in me. See, there's a sense in which we ought to be praying and asking specifically in the context of those places that God's putting His finger and saying, God, I need you to work in me. I will tell you, there are sins in my life that I've wrestled with for years and years and years. And I've begged and I begged and I begged and said, God, I want this to change. And I've tried and I tried and I failed and I've tried and I failed and I've tried and I failed and I tried. And some of you, you know exactly what I'm talking about because you're right in the middle of it. And there's two ways you can go with that. Give up or get down on your knees and ask God for ongoing help in that place. God, I can't do it on my own. See, if the Word doesn't lead to a place where you recognize your insufficiency, I think of it like this. We're in the process, some of you know we're in the process of selling our house. We're trying to move. And now we're at a place where we've got a contract on our home, and then we've had the inspection, and we've gotten a list of things that we need to fix. And it's just been absolute chaos. If I'm not here, I'm working at home, trying to fix things and get things ready. And the other day, we turned our garage into an extra room in the house because we've got 4 boys in a 3-bedroom house, and they're huge. And so we don't have a basement, and so we turned it into a playroom. And we've got to deconvert. So I'm in the process of deconverting, and I was ripping out the subfloor and getting the garage door working. And as I'm ripping out the subfloor, I looked and I saw some cracks in the concrete. And there are certain times when I freak out a little bit, and this was one of them. I started freaking out, and I'm going, okay, there's certain things I can do. I can demo anything. I rip anything apart, but that I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And so, but I know somebody that does. And so I picked up my phone and I called Michael Borsellino. I mean, that guy he's a servant and he knows what he's doing. And I called him up on the phone and I said, Michael, I've got a problem. And I'm a little bit freaking out on the phone. And I said, I got a problem. I don't know how serious it is. I need you to tell me because I think my house is going to fall down. He says, well, send me some pictures. So I sent him some pictures and he called. We get back on the phone. He says, Dan, don't worry about that. Here's all. It's normal. Here's what he starts going through. Here's what you need to do. And I stopped him partway through and I said, Michael, I'm just going to ask you, can you come over? And Nikki was in there and she goes, just go and help him. Just go and help him. And he did. The next day he came and he helped me. But here's why I called him. Because inadequate, adequate. I got confronted with something that said, Dan, you don't know what you're doing. And I don't. There's plenty of things that I don't. But it was a moment where I had the choice. Either I'm going to try to fix it on my own and it's going to look like a 1-year-old fixed it, or I'm going to call somebody who knows what they're doing and say, please come over and help me. And see, that's what the Word should be doing. See, the Word ought to be bringing you to your knees. If you're not going to the Word and it's not leading you to prayer, to go, God, picking up the phone, God, I have no idea what I'm doing right now. You got a wrong relationship with the Word. But here's the wonderful thing. Not only should it lead you to that prayer of dependence and going down on your knees and saying, God, I can't do it on my own. You know what I love? It should also lead you to unshakable confidence. Look at the next verse. Look at verse 7. I will praise you with an upright heart when I learn your righteous rules. I'm not there yet, but I will be. I will keep your statutes. Do not utter. I love this. How do you go from that place where you go, man, God, I can't do it on my own. I'm a mess. I wish that I was there, to going, I'm going to get there, though. How do you get there? How do you go from broken and God, I've been trying and I've been failing, to that place where you say, but I have unshakable confidence that I'm going to arrive there? The answer is in the verse that I just read. For God is at work within you. For God is at work within you. You're praying to the God who has all the power, who's called you His own. And some of you desperately need to hear this morning, because I've heard it too often from all sorts of people, particularly those who have more experience and a little bit more gray in their hair. I've heard people say, this is just the way that I am and I can't change, so here it is, take it or leave it. Do you understand? For those of you in the room who've given up, for those of you in the room who've been trying and failing, and you've gotten to the place where you go, what's the point of trying anymore? You don't want to know what's happened is you've forgotten that God is at work within you. It's not just you. God doesn't just go, here you are, I'll see you when you die. Get it together, and hopefully everything works out, but you got to get this all done. See, God doesn't drop a list and say, get it done. Paul says that God is at work within you to work and to will to His good pleasure, and His pleasure is to see you transformed and changed to become the very person that you were made to be. God is at work within you. And let me just ask you a question. When's the last time God failed? I mean, He just blew it. When's the last time? Give me the list of when He has been unfaithful, of when He didn't keep His promise. When he said, yeah, I had really good intentions, but I can't get that done. When's the last time? I'm certain you've got lists of people you could say that of in maybe even this room. But when's the last time God failed? The answer, if we're really honest, is never. God doesn't fail. God keeps His word. God is faithful. And you need to hear this morning. God always finishes what He starts. Always, 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 always. And if you've given up, it's because you've forgotten that God is at work within you. God, the God who created this, the God who created you, the God who killed sin and defeated death for you, the God who is going to make all of this is at work in remaking you today. Does that mean that you're going to change in a moment? Does that mean you're going to get victory like that? No, it means it could happen, but God doesn't tend to work that way because God has you on a journey to grow in a relationship with Him, and the context is learning to faithfully depend on His faithfulness in your life. Paul says, Philippians chapter 1, verse 6, it's one of my favorite verses. It's one that I have clung to my whole life. He says, I am certain of this. I'm confident. And when Paul's confident, he's saying, I absolutely know this is true. Even if you don't, He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion on the day of Christ. On the day of His return, He's going to finish what He started. And you should have unshakable confidence. And I want you to hear this. It's absolutely essential. Because when you lose confidence, you know what you stop doing? Trying. Because what's the point? And that's where some of you have gotten to. You say, well, what's the point? And listen, when you say what's the point, it's because you've gotten out of place. There is a disconnect between you and truth. He says, I will. And some of you, you're not certain anymore. Some of you are shaken, and some of you are on the ground, and you've given up, and you said, what's the point? I haven't changed. And the answer is, here's what's the point. Here's how you can be confident, because God is at work in you. And if you should be saying, I will, I will, I will. Though today I may fail, I will. And here's the last thing. Not only the confidence, here's where it should lead us to, is practical application. To take God's word and to practically apply it into our lives. Be very clear with me that the purpose of God's word is not to provide you with information. That's not the primary purpose of it. I'm not saying there isn't information in it, you should be learning the truth of it. But the primary goal is not for you to know more. Maturity does not equal knowledge. Knowledge does not equal maturity. You can be the smartest person in the room. You can know all of this backwards and forwards. The question that Jesus is not going to ask you when you stand before Him one day is not, hey, tell me all the things that you know. I'm so impressed by all of your knowledge. Tell me all the stuff that you've got up in here. Here's the question that He's going to ask you. What did you do with what you knew? What did you do? See, a right relationship with God's word is not just informational, not primarily. It's about challenging yourself to say, okay, so now what is God calling me to do? One of the last questions every week on the back of your notes, we have our connecting groups that meet together. And there's a series of questions that are only there as helps. You don't have to go through them. But the last question every single week is the same. What is one thing you will do this week as a result of what you heard? Do you know why? Because all you do is hear you've failed. The work of application, see, my job is to get up here and help you, and I will give you an application today, and you'll have to decide whether or not you take it. But at the end of the day, the work of application is your job and mine. We're supposed to work together, but at the end of the day, you're the one who has to ask, okay, God, what do you want me to do? James chapter 1, verse 22 says, do not just be hearers of the word, but be doers also. Because listen, when you're just hearing, you're deceiving yourself into thinking that, boy, you are really spiritually mature when the reality is you're not. It's application. So he asks the question in verse 9, okay, so then what do I do? How can a young man keep his way pure? And by the way, this isn't just for young people, but definitely, here as an older man, David, is looking back and he's saying, young men in the room, young men and women, listen to me. This isn't just for someday when you grow up. The message is, no matter what your age, start now. If this is how we ought to relate to the Word, then, okay, so how do I do it? As he's asking practically, okay, so what do I do now? How does a young man keep his way pure? He says, by guarding it according to your Word. In other words, I need to have God's Word as a guard over my heart and over my life that is directing the way that I'm living. It's guarding, it's filtering, it's defining my life. I have it as a guard. And in order for that to happen, look at what he says. Skip down to verse 11. Circle the word stored. He says, I have stored up your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. Part of the relationship to God's word is this. It shouldn't just stay in here. It needs to get in here. He says, here's how, okay, I want to keep my way pure. I want to follow your way. Okay, so then I can't just be associated, I can't just be acquainted with it. It needs to be stored up and stored. The other versions at times say hidden. I've hidden your word in my heart. It's not just about hiding it in here. Storing is you're putting it there for a purpose to be used at other times. So when you have a storeroom, you put things in there you know you're going to need at some point. You may not need them at that point, but there's in there so that when you need them, you can go in, you open it up, and you find that thing, you pull it out, and you go, okay, I need this right now. David says, that's what I've done. I've taken your word, and I've actually put it in here so that when I need it, as things happen, it's that guard inside that's watching over my life so that when temptation and things come into my life, I've got this word ready to go. I don't need to Google it or web search it because I've got it stored up inside of me. And don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing and saying don't ever Google a verse. Please, if you don't have a verse ready, Google it. But what I'm saying is if it never moves beyond that, you've got a problem with your association with God's Word. He says, here's the practical application. It's got to get stored up. And how do we do that? Well, look at verse 15. He says, I will meditate on your precepts and fix my eyes on your ways. I will delight in your statutes. I will not forget your word. The word meditate, here's the practical application. He says, here's how I move it from the outside to the inside. Meditation, it's that fill in there, the last point. Meditation is the process of moving God's word from the external to the internal. Now, when we talk about meditation, we're not talking about Eastern meditation, empty your mind. Become nothingness inside of you. That's not what we're talking about. Meditation in God's Word is about filling your mind with God's Word. It's not emptying it. It's filling it. It's taking God's Word and bringing your mind. Some of you have heard me use this illustration before. It's disgusting, but maybe it'll help you remember. Meditation is very similar to a cow chewing its cud. Right? You know how a cow chews its cud? I'm a farm boy. So I know how a cow chews its cud, right? Chews the grass or whatever, and it swallows it down, goes into his stomach, and then later on, it burps it back up into its mouth and chews it some more, swallows it down into its stomach, burps it back up, chews on it some more, right? Don't try this at home, at least not with food, right? It's that process of I'm chewing, I'm swallowing, I'm bringing it back up, I'm chewing on it some more. This is what it looks like to meditate. It's that I've got some word from God, scriptural truth, and I'm going to chew on it. I'm going to let it sink in, and then I'm going to bring it back up, and I'm going to think about it some more, and I'm going to focus my heart and mind on it some more, and then I'm going to let it soak in, and then I'm going to bring it back up. And it's this process of taking the word and let it saturate your mind and to saturate your life. He says, here's what needs to happen if you're going to have a right relationship with the word. You got to practically apply it to your life. And if you're going to practically apply it, let me tell you, here's just a simple thing. And I want to do two things, and then I'm done. Here's a practical application, and then I want to give you an encouragement. Practical application. You got a note card when you were sitting out there this morning. Our ushers passed them out to you. Here's what I would want you to do today. And I know some of you are going to go, nobody tells me what to do. I'm not going to do it. Just do this with me, okay? I want you to pick one verse from those 16 verses that we've been studying this morning, and I want you to write it on the note card before you leave today. One verse. Now, don't do it right now because I've got a couple more things I want to say to you. One verse, and then I want you to take that note card. If you got a pocket, put it in your pocket. Whatever you do, I want you to carry it with you throughout the week. And that one verse, I want you to keep bringing it out. Meditate on it. You got to do something. And this is really not that. I'm not asking you for a lot. It's going to take you like 10 seconds to read it, put it back in your pocket. Meditate on it this week. We got to start taking some practical steps here. Find that verse. Any verse in there. It doesn't matter. Just take a verse. It's not about quantity. It's about quality. And then let me give you just a word of encouragement, because again, some of you have given up. Some of you are kind of going, I don't know, what's the point? No matter where you are, here's David's promise to you today. Blessed is the one whose ways are blameless, who walk according to the law of the Lord. He's saying, you want to be happy? You do. I know you do. And here's the promise. If you will start moving in this direction, if you will bring your life into obedience under God's word, guaranteed you will find that joy that you're looking for. Guaranteed. And you say, how do you know? Here's how you know. Look at the very middle of Psalm 119, verses 1 through 16. We just looked at it a few moments ago, and we skipped over it very quickly. He says at the very end of verse 8, I will keep your statutes. And he says this, do not utterly forsake me. Here's what I want you to hear. God's already answered that prayer. He answered it for David, but he's also answered it for you. You know, one of my sons, he's very afraid at nighttime. And so every night we have this process. He calls it head down to toe. We have a process, and really it's just a meditation on God's truth. And so what I talk about is letting that fear leave his body. So you've got to let fear. It has no place in you any longer. Instead, you've got to let God's peace fill you up. And I put my hand on his heart, and I say, you've got to let God's peace settle onto your very heart and to let it calm you down. As you remember, as you bring your life under the truth, I say that God loves you, that God is with you, that God never leaves, and he never forsakes you. And you know that it's true, because in your deepest and darkest moment, when you were furthest from him, when you were rejecting him, when you hated him, when you were opposed to him, when you were going the opposite direction, in your darkest, most frightening moment, he didn't abandon you there. He didn't leave you there. Instead, he came and he met you in the middle of the darkness. And guess what he did? He took it on himself and he killed it. He took it into the grave and he rose again and he conquered sin and death so that he could take a hold of you. And do you know what Scripture says? That there is nothing that can snatch you out of his hand. And if he would do that for you, I guarantee you tonight, he won't leave you or forsake you. And if that's true, then you can have the confidence in the midst of failure, in the midst of shortcomings, in the midst of a struggle, in the midst of a call to raise the bar, seeing the distance between those two things, the confidence to keep moving forward and seeking him. David says, you want the way to happiness, and you do. Now here's the question, what will you do with it?